Okay, welcome back to Infinite Investors, the home for all new and non-investors. I'm Curtis, and today we have another investment video for you. And I feel like this is going to be the macroeconomic topic that we're going to be talking about for the next few months. Obviously, you can tell from the title that we're going to talk about coronavirus and how it's impacting the market at the moment, but there are some potential opportunities to invest with coronavirus from a timing standpoint, but also from a stock market standpoint in terms of picking the right stock. So if you want to know more, please like, comment, subscribe, help the channel get to 4K subscribers so we can get the world of investing out to more people in a clear, simple and transparent manner. For those of you that haven't watched my portfolio update for last week, go and check it out. In that portfolio update, I mentioned the 7 ways that coronavirus is going to impact the stock market. So I'm going to give another brief overview of the 7 ways it's going to impact the stock market, and that can let you know that these types of outbreaks will always have a material impact to your stock market performance. So the first way is that it will harm travel. So where you've got these outbreaks, you will have people more reluctant to travel, and if people are more reluctant to travel, particularly right now being the Lunar New Year within China, it does mean that less money will be flowing from economy to economy. Less people will be going to different countries and spending money. Airlines will be receiving less money. Hotels will be receiving less money, etc., etc. So that will damage the travel business. And in conjunction with that, number 2 is that there will be a reduction in consumption. So typically around this time of year, there is a higher level of spending with people within China because of the new year. However, because of this, there's going to be a reduced amount of consumer spending. Also, there's going to be reduced production. We learned in the last portfolio update that 900 people were sick and 26 people had passed away from coronavirus. That number today has gone up to 81 people. SARS, which is probably the most comparable illness, if you guys remember the SARS illness around 2003, I believe, had 8,100 people that were sickened and 774 people dying, and that lasted about 3-4 months, I believe. So right now we're in a couple of weeks, maybe just about a week of this coronavirus outbreak. There's potentially a lot more to come, and what that will mean is that areas will be closed off, shipping lanes will be closed off, people won't be producing some of the goods and services that we're known to basically buy. Now that's obviously going to have a massive impact on the stock market as well. You've got the wider population impact. So because things are being closed off, it doesn't just affect those that have been sickened or those that have passed away, it also affects anyone within that vicinity. We learned that the Great Wall of China was closed off, 16 cities were closed off. We learned that restricted movement for 46 million people in China during some of the most busiest times. A lot of events were closed off. So that will basically mean people can't get on with their normal lives, their normal day jobs. If you think, I don't have the exact stats for this, I'm going to just make a number up, but I think you'll get the sentiment. Imagine TfL in the UK. Imagine there was an outbreak in the UK, or just imagine that on a Monday morning 30 TfL drivers, train drivers, decided to not come to work. Think about the restriction of movement that would happen for tens of millions of people probably in and around the London area. So it could only take potentially 30 people to not turn up to work in really crucial, critical positions that could affect the movement of millions. And then if the movement of millions are affected, that means that those businesses potentially won't be producing. Businesses around might not be earning money from shops or food shops or restaurants or lunch breaks or whatever. So there's obviously a bigger, wider impact to be aware of from that standpoint. There are global cases that have been thought about and been sort of understood and learned of recently from China, most of Asia, Saudi Arabia, US, Scotland, 11 more countries like France, Australia. Loads of countries have now hit the outbreak for coronavirus. So we know that this is not going to be an isolated incident from a regional standpoint, but it's actually going to be a global thing. Then you're seeing the impact to airline stocks. So last week, airline stocks took a bit of a battering. Also, travel stocks took a bit of a battering as well, as people are more reluctant not just to travel immediately, but to also book travel into different areas until this thing is potentially under control. We saw the likes of McDonald's and Disney in China close their operations. McDonald's closed branches, Disney closed Disney studios, and we saw both of those stocks drop about 1% due to it. So we can see that there is a material impact to the stock market. Right now I'm on the Washington Post, and it says global stock market shudder as coronavirus spreads. The Dow fell 450 points on fears the outbreak will turn into a pandemic that disrupts international commerce. Global markets took a sharp downturn on Monday as investors grew increasingly anxious about the swift spread of the coronavirus beyond China. The Dow plunged 450 points, or about 1.6%. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq futures were also down significantly, 1.6% and 1.9% respectively. I've had a look at my portfolio this morning, and I don't know the percentage yet because I haven't worked it out, but I'm just going to tell you the actual figure, and I've dropped about £600 this today alone, just within my portfolio. And it's across the board. It's not one particular stock. It's not one stock that's just taken, the brunt of it. I've dropped a decent amount across a multiple number of stocks, which is basically, I personally am attributing it to coronavirus. And we're seeing that the impact of coronavirus is potentially, having on the stock market as well. I'm on Market Watch at now. These stocks are most at risk from the spreading coronavirus. Fears over the spreading coronavirus have set into the markets. Global stocks as well as US futures are tumbling on Monday as the death toll from the virus, which causes respiratory illness, rises, and the number of confirmed cases keeps growing. The World Health Organization's decision not to declare the virus a public health emergency calmed investors momentarily last week, but concerns have quickly returned, and we've seen those returned concerns this morning. Now, it talks about SARS, and it gives you some comparative analysis from SARS, which I think is really, really helpful in a time like this. So he said there were already parallels with the SARS epidemic in 2003, as the HSI index has corrected by 3.7% in the past 2 days, having fallen 9% at the beginning of the SARS crisis. This name said during the 2003 crisis, SARS crisis, the Hong Kong listed stocks that corrected the most included hotels, airlines, telecoms, and developers. So when we're talking about correcting, we mean that it's going back down because potentially it was elevated too much, and we already are in a bullish market. So this probably is the catalyst. We talked about in 2 portfolio updates, sometimes you need a catalyst in order to start a correction. This could be that catalyst as well. So on the other hand, the most resilient ones were insurance, utilities, and railroads. So this is giving you an indication as these are some of the types of stocks that had a negative impact during the SARS epidemic, but these are some of the stocks that actually were quite resilient through that time. So obviously having a look at your portfolio, seeing what exposure you have to different sectors. If you're trying to ask yourself, Curtis, or ask yourself, you're not asking me obviously, ask yourself, what's your name? John, what am I going to do with this coronavirus situation with my portfolio? You might think to yourself, all right, cool, let me look at my sectors, let me look at the allocations I've got within different industries. Do I have exposure into insurance, utilities, and railroads potentially? Do I have too much exposure in hotels, airlines, telecoms, and developers? Is there some money that I can basically move around in order to try and mitigate some of this risk as well? There was a bit here where maybe it was in a different article, I don't know, but basically there was something about it took about 2 months for a recovery from SARS. So what it was basically saying is that when the SARS epidemic hit, for about 2 months from the time it hit, the stock market was going down. It went downhill. And it was correcting for about 2 months. So just be prepared that this coronavirus, if longer than SARS or if the same amount of time as SARS, we could be looking at going into the end of March before things start to turn around. But what it did say is that when it did turn around, it turned around stronger and better than it did perform. I'm going to try to find that article. I was reading that article today, and maybe it's not the articles that's on the screen at the moment, but I am going to try and find that article for you you so that you guys can, have that information, and therefore hopefully it's going to be beneficial for you. But I think the key thing from that message is basically letting you know that this could be quite a sustained period of correction, and obviously a bearish market that we could potentially be entering. Also, with earnings coming up this week, next week, the week after, and a lot of major companies doing their earnings updates, there could be a lot of volatility. You could see potentially Apple, AMD, Tesla all rise because of their earnings, but then all fall because of coronavirus. So just be prepared for a lot of volatility over the next coming days, weeks, months with a lot of your stocks, because you know what, it's going to be very, very unpredictable times. I'm going to leave this link in the description, but it's talking to you about some of the big major tech stocks that are going to be doing their earnings announcements this week, and what to potentially expect, and how that could obviously have an impact on the performance as well. Now, one thing I do want to end on is basically talking about what other opportunities there are. So I'm on Nasdaq, and it says 5 biotech stocks to watch with the coronavirus scare. So what I personally believe is that anything that's the adverse of an event is always going to have a positive impact. That's my personal opinion. It's not based on any professional analysis. It's just based off what I think is common sense and a gut feeling. An example is if there's going to be an Iran-USA war, then defense stocks is going to rise. Because quite simply, people are going to flock to that. If there's going to be, I don't know, some form of recession, then fast food and cigarette stocks is going to rise as people potentially go to that. We talked about that in the recession video. If you can't find the link, go and check the recession video. I'll put the link in the description, and it will give you the link to how fast food, cigarettes can be, do well in a time of, say, a recession. There's just going to be certain types of events that will trigger certain types of stocks to have a certain type of performance, is basically the argument here. And I think in this context, anything to do in the health sector is going to have a material impact. It's going to potentially have a beneficial impact, particularly if they have some form of exposure into China. I believe that's going to have an impact. So this article talks about some biotech stocks, and it names 5 biotech stocks from BioCryst Pharmaceuticals, Gilead Sciences, Inovio, Moderna, and Novavax, which they believe is going to have a beneficial impact to this coronavirus. So I'm not going to read all of the information, but what I will say is that Gilead is on free trade, and I went and looked at the performance of Gilead today, and Gilead has gone up 1%, which is a quite a big jump for today only, because of this whole coronavirus situation, whereas some of my other stocks have dropped 2%, dropped 1%, dropped 0.5%, dropped 3%. So it does show quite a predictable correlation where stocks like this is going up because they're potentially going to have cures or treatments to these types of things, whereas some of my existing stocks are going down. So this is available on free trade. Listen, this is not a recommendation. I'm not telling you to go buy Gilead Sciences. I'm not telling you that I'm going to buy Gilead Sciences. But what I am saying is that if you are concerned with coronavirus, if you aren't in a position where you're just going to continue as normal, dollar cost average, invest the way you're investing, and ignore coronavirus, if you feel you need to act on it, then the things you need to be aware of is looking at what potential opportunities there are out there in the medical space, in the biopharmaceutical space, and where you can potentially shave off in your current portfolio, and obviously what type of horizon you're potentially looking at a lot of this volatility, which going on past performance with SARS, I think about a 2-month horizon is something that you should sort of probably be aware of or be expecting that there's going to be some volatility and some bearish movements. Listen, I tried to motor through this very quickly. I hope you found this interesting and useful. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, get into the comments box. Please follow me on Instagram at Infinite Investors, also on Twitter at Infinite Investors. We like to do different polls, different questions, keep people engaged, and you can hear from other people as well. Join the Discord group. All of the links will be in the description as well. And if you are new to free trade and you do want to sign up and get a free share, then the link will be in the description, and I will put a pinned comment in the comment section as well. Other than that, have a good evening, and I will catch you next time with another investment video. Peace.